I'd like to acknowledge that we're hosting this event in Melbourne on the lands of the Kulin Nation, from whose ancestral lands I am now speaking to you. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which every viewer watches, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating. We pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging, acknowledging them as the traditional custodians of knowledge for these lands. Well, what a couple of years has it been since we last got together. The pandemic has turned the world inside out in so many ways. And while we may debate about what has just happened and is still happening around us, there is perhaps one thing that there would be no debate about. I don't remember a time in my lifetime a more disrupted, banged out of joint, and confronting challenge to our day-to-day lives than what we've experienced in the last few months. How we spend our days and who we spend our days with or not with has been transformed categorically by choice and by law. One of the qualities of time that we have always been aware of has been thrown into aspect in these last few months, that it is plastic, that it is mutable, that it is not in fact simply metered out in seconds, minutes, and hours, but that it bends and twists in our experience of it. Time flies and time drags, but few of us would say that the last year has flown by. So when thinking about this year's theme and what it should be, or perhaps better, what this year's catalyst should be for bringing people together, we thought what better subject to look at than time itself. From the geological churn of the ground below to the millisecond exchanges of financial data, every aspect of our lives is ruled by this uncompromising force. Time resonates with us all, both in the intimate scale of our day-to-day lives and also in the scale of the city, with time determining so much of how we approach the building and designing of our cities. We like to think of the big decisions we make about cities and buildings and infrastructure as being driven by the serious business of money and cost. What is the cost-benefit analysis? What's the return on investment? But what we rarely question is, what is the time frame for that benefit? What is the time frame for that return? We consistently underestimate the critical, primary even, role of time in those calculations. Should we make decisions about our cities in order to meet the expectations of the next financial quarter, or perhaps the next 3 or 4 years in a political cycle? Should cities be designed to meet the needs of our lifetimes, or to meet the needs of future generations, 30 years from now, 100 years from now? Depending on which time frame you apply to our urban decisions, you will conceive of very different types of cities. Architecture, of course, has been traditionally a very slow profession. It can take 10 to 20 years for a young architect to get their hands on an interesting project. It can take 5 or 10 years or more for that project to actually go through the motions of design development, planning, and construction. In the past, this has been almost worth it, as architects have assumed that their new wonderful buildings might last for generations. This, however, may not still be the case. Just as there is a great acceleration within natural systems, if we can still call them that, there's also an acceleration in population growth and in our ever-expanding urban landscapes. With this, every single aspect of how we build and adapt our cities is being accelerated. Nothing ever has enough time. I know that, you know that, anyone involved in designing and building cities knows that. So we have the strange temporal dissonance, where a profession and an industry that has traditionally been geared towards the long game, the marathon, finds itself in a 100-meter race every single day. What if we challenge this perpetual paradigm of no one ever having enough time? What if the thing we lacked the most was not the money to do things right, but the time to do things right? For the Living Cities Forum 2021, we have assembled a wonderful lineup of speakers from around the world to bring their own perspectives to time and how the world seen through different temporal lenses can look like a whole other place. The timing of the forum during this pandemic is important, as the pandemic compels cities to slow their growth, reduce their resources, minimize their footprints, and perhaps make us humans think about life outside of our own timeframes. Before we take this journey in the sifting sands of time, I'd like to quickly thank those who have helped make today possible. I'd like to thank the Victorian Government through Creative Victoria and Development Victoria. I'd like to thank RICV and, of course, the Nemi Milgram Foundation. If you're joining us through socials, the hashtag is hashtag LivingCities21. I did want to mention that alongside our keynote speakers, we also have pulled together a number of additional voices who have been asked to respond to questions about time, including Helen Hester, Jack Self, Zhu Chen, Ertzi Grau, and these recordings will be found on the Living Cities Forum website. I also wanted to make a quick mention about this wonderful platform that we are all joined by together today. We've probably all grown a bit exhausted by our screens, but they really have allowed things to happen that not so long ago would have seemed like madness. For a start, we are joined today by people beaming in from Houston, Berlin, New Zealand, New York, and Belgium, at a fraction of the carbon footprint they might otherwise have expended. We were due to have this event in Fed Square, as usual, but now we are online, so we're welcoming many, many more people than might otherwise have been able to welcome. So we must count our blessings. This is all recorded, so you might in fact be joining us from the future. So if you're joining us from 2022 or 2050, welcome from the 22nd of July, 2021. Now we have 3 sessions coming up, each separated by a break to help you regain circulation and get a cup of tea. Each session will riff on a different aspect of time and temporality. Later sessions include real time and over again, but our first session is called The Long View, which invites us to think about other ways of perceiving and measuring time. Indeed, it is true that we mark time in the split seconds it takes for a message to load or an app to refresh. Yet while expectations of instant access and immediacy shape political processes and determine design outcomes, the climate crisis compels us to think about consequences that extend beyond our lifespans and for generations to come. To help us through the session, we have 3 speakers. Timothy Morton is a Texan-based philosopher and Rita Shea Guffey Chair in English at Rice University. They write prolifically, not least about and around the subject of object-oriented ontology, advocating for a radical rethink in the way humans conceive of the world and all that's in it, questioning binary definitions of the living and the non-living. Through this lens, the subject-object way of looking at the world, which is a foundation stone upon which Western thinking has been built for centuries, is essentially a master-slave relationship, and it's had its day. After Timothy, we are joined by Sarah Lynn Rees. She's a Palawa woman descending from the people of Northeast Tasmania. As an Indigenous woman, she brings a unique perspective to her role in architecture, underpinned by her personal experience, heritage, and research into the Indigenous built environment. Bruce Pascoe is a Yuin, Bunurong and Tasmanian man who has published widely in both adult and young adult literature. Bruce is best known for the critically acclaimed book, Dark Emu, which joins a number of other writers, including Bill Gamage and others, in rethinking how we conceive of pre-colonial Australia and how the land was occupied, lived on, and managed for millennia before the first ships arrived. Pascoe is also committed to research on traditional food growing processes through his latest project, Black Duck Foods.